My name is Ava Monroe. On the night I legally became an adult, I made a wish over the flickering candles of a generic supermarket cake. At that exact moment, my stepmother, Sharon Vance, dropped a thick stack of papers onto our dining room table in Omaha. Her voice cut through the quiet hum of the house. "Sign this right now or you're out of this house for good." She jabbed a manicured finger at a faded copy of a trust document. A brat like you was never meant to have $1.8 million. That money is for this family. My father, Robert Monroe, did what he always did. He found something interesting on the floor to stare at. My stepbrother, Leo, just leaned back in his chair, a smug grin spreading across his face like he'd just opened his favorite Christmas present. I didn't sign. Less than 10 minutes later, I was standing on the freezing pavement, the front door locked firmly behind me. I had a single backpack, and the negative 10-degree wind felt like it was slicing right through my thin hoodie. In a daze, I started walking the same path I'd taken for months. I ended up on the same dark street corner, looking at the same elderly woman. She was wrapped in a threadbare coat, sitting on a flattened piece of cardboard, a small tin cup placed neatly in front of her. Just like I did every other night, I pulled out the last bill I had, a $5 bill, and gently placed it in her cup. But this time was different. Her dry, cold fingers suddenly clamped around my wrist. Her grip was astonishingly strong. She pulled me closer, her eyes wide with what looked like genuine terror, and whispered, "Listen to me, child. Tonight you cannot sleep on the streets. Don't go to the park. Don't go anywhere. They would expect to find you. You need to find the cheapest motel you can, pay with cash, and lock your door. Tomorrow morning, you come back here. I have something for you, something that will save your life." Welcome to my story. If you've ever felt the sting of betrayal from the very people who were supposed to protect and love you, I need you to stay with me until the very end. If you're watching this from somewhere cold tonight, go ahead and hit that like button. Drop your city in the comments below and make sure to subscribe. I'm sharing real stories about family drama and sweet revenge every single day. I was shaking on that dark Omaha sidewalk, the wind relentlessly attacking me. I rummaged through my backpack, my fingers numb, pulling out the last of my crumpled bills. $132. That was my entire life savings, earned from an entire summer of bussing tables at a local diner. That was it. That was all I had to my name. The wind was brutal, a physical force that seemed determined to freeze me solid. I walked down the main drag until I saw a flickering, sickly pink neon sign that blinked erratically. North Star Inn. Vacancy. The man at the front desk was more interested in his phone than in me. He didn't even look up as I slid $42 across the worn-out counter. It was a cash-only place. No ID, no registration, no questions asked. My room, number 7, reeked of stale cigarette smoke and industrial-strength bleach, but the deadbolt on the door was solid, and the window had a working lock. I was too cold and too scared to even take my boots off. I just curled up on the bed, still in my coat, and pulled the thin, scratchy blanket over me. I cried until I was completely empty, until there were no more tears left to shed. The next morning, I walked straight back to that corner. Ms. Eleanor was already there, sitting on her usual square of cardboard, her coat pulled tightly around her, the tin cup sitting expectantly at her feet. I knelt down beside her. "You knew," I said, my voice hoarse. "You knew something was going to happen that night." "How?" She looked at me for a long, quiet moment, her eyes seeming to see right through me. "You can call me Ms. Eleanor Gable. I've been watching you for a while now, child. The people in that house, they want you gone, and they're not the type to give up." I told her everything. I told her about the trust, about how Sharon kept waving that old, outdated copy of the document in my face, screaming that if I didn't get the money, it would go to my dad anyway. I told her how Sharon was utterly convinced that the money belonged to my father, to the family. Missy, Eleanor just listened, her expression unchanging, nodding slowly as if she had heard this exact kind of story 1,000 times before. That same afternoon, I walked into a 24-hour gas go 2 blocks from the park and practically begged the manager for a job. He looked me up and down, saw the desperation in my eyes, and hired me for the overnight cashier shift on the spot. $11 an hour, cash under the table, no paperwork. My first real paycheck wouldn't come for 2 weeks, but I was desperate. The nights quickly fell into a grim, exhausting rhythm. I'd clock in at 11 p.m., mop the sticky floors, restock the brightly colored energy drinks and bags of chips, and ring up an endless parade of long-haul truckers and kids coming down from their clubbing highs until the sun started to rise at 7 a.m. I survived on 99-cent instant noodles and the day-old pastries from the discount rack. But every single shift, without fail, I set aside $5. Sometimes, if I was lucky, I could manage 10. And as soon as my shift was over, I would walk to the corner and slip the money into Ms. Eleanor's cup. She never asked me where it came from. She would just take my cold hand between her own dry ones, give it a gentle squeeze, and say, "Thank you, dear." Some nights, a sharp chemical odor would drift over from the public park nearby. It smelled like someone had spilled a giant can of gasoline. I tried to convince myself it was just fumes from the gas station across the street. I was too tired, too worn down to let my mind wander to darker possibilities. Then one morning, after I'd pulled a grueling double shift because another cashier had called in sick, I decided to cut through the park on my way back to the motel. It was my usual shortcut. But this time, it was different. Yellow police tape blocked every entrance. The fire trucks were gone, but the overpowering stench of gasoline and melted plastic hung heavy and nauseating in the air. Every single one of the benches I used to crash on when I couldn't afford the motel was now a twisted, blackened skeleton of metal. The exact corner where I used to hide my backpack under a loose piece of tarp was nothing but a pile of ash and the charred remains of a sleeping bag someone else must have left there. I saw a couple of investigators in official jackets taking samples from a scorched plastic bottle, a rag still crudely jammed into its neck. I overheard one of them say to his partner that they had 2 distinct pore patterns and a clear shoe print in the damp grass nearby. I just stood there, staring at the devastation, my stomach churning. I felt like I was going to be sick right there on the sidewalk. Those benches, they were my last resort. My only backup plan. And someone had just made a very deliberate, very violent point of making sure I had nowhere left to go. My steps slowed the instant I saw the red and blue lights flashing against the skeletal remains of the park benches. The entire north side of the park was a crime scene, cordoned off with that bright yellow tape that whipped and snapped in the morning wind. 2 fire investigators were on their knees, carefully scraping soot from the blackened ground into evidence jars, while another officer photographed a half-melted water bottle with a piece of cloth still stuck in its neck. The air itself tasted foul, like a toxic cocktail of gasoline and burned plastic. Just then, a familiar silver sedan screeched to a halt at the curb. My friend Chloe Davis jumped out, her diner apron flapping around her, her eyes wide with panic. "Ava, I've been driving around these streets every single morning looking for you." She reached out to grab me, but I instinctively took a step back. "I'm fine, Chloe. I'm handling it," I said, my voice sounding more confident than I felt. "You call this handling it?" she exclaimed, gesturing wildly at the burned-out mess behind me. "Get in the car. Right now. You're coming home with me." I just shook my head. I couldn't. I can't drag you into this, whatever this is. She opened her mouth to argue, her face a mask of frustration and concern, but I was already walking away, leaving her standing there by her car. That evening, after a long shift of wiping down counters and restocking shelves until my fingers smelled of citrus-scented cleaner, I went straight to Miss Eleanor's corner. She was already there, her thin coat pulled tight against the biting cold. I crouched down beside her. "You knew," I said again, this time as a statement, not a question. "The night they kicked me out, you knew something was coming." "How?" She patted the cold cardboard beside her. "Sit down, child." I sat. She kept her voice low, a conspiratorial whisper. "About 3 weeks ago, I started noticing the same kid. He'd circle this block almost every night. Expensive sneakers, nice jacket. He never dropped a single penny in my cup. He just watched. He watched you count your tips. He watched which way you walked when you left. I've seen that look in a man's eyes before. It's the look of someone who is planning something from a distance." She reached deep inside the layers of her clothing and pulled out a tiny black USB drive, pressing it firmly into my palm. Along with it was a folded, wrinkled scrap of paper. On the paper, written in shaky, blocky letters, were 2 words: "Watch alone." "I bought a cheap little solar-powered security camera at a pawn shop," she whispered, her eyes scanning the street. "I mounted it high up on that lamppost across the street. It's been recording ever since I first saw him. Whatever is on that drive, you need to look at it by yourself first. Then you decide what needs to be done." I closed my fist around the small, cool drive. Why? Why would you risk all this for me? A sad, knowing look crossed her face. Because 25 years ago, my own son decided I was worth more to him dead than alive. And nobody stood up for me back then. I'm too old to fight anymore, child, but I'm not too old to hand you the weapon. Back in the stale air of room 7, I locked the door and, for good measure, dragged the heavy wooden dresser in front of it. My hands were trembling as I plugged the USB drive into my old, cracked laptop. There was only one file on it. I clicked play. The screen flickered to life, showing grainy night vision footage. The timestamp read 4 nights ago. 2 figures walked into the frame, both carrying large red plastic gas cans. The taller of the 2 set his can down, pulled out his phone, and tilted the screen toward the streetlight, his face illuminated in the glow. My blood ran cold. It was Leo Vance, my stepbrother. He was grinning, a cruel, mocking smile, like this was all some hilarious game. He turned to his friend and said, "We've got to finish this before Friday. She signs the papers at the bank next week, and then that money's locked down to her forever. After that, we don't get a second chance." His friend just laughed, a high, nervous sound. He unscrewed the cap of his can and started splashing gasoline all over the benches. The very benches I rotated between sleeping on. Leo joined in, making sure to completely drench the exact spot where I used to hide my backpack. Then he looked directly at his own phone, which he was using to record, and said, "One less problem." He struck a match, and the world on my screen erupted in flames. I watched the entire clip 3 times, my heart pounding so loudly in my chest, I was sure the people in the next room could hear it. Every single second of that video was evidence. Every word he spoke was a confession. I sat there on the edge of the flimsy motel bed, completely frozen. My hands were shaking so violently that the empty plastic cup I was holding slipped from my grasp and shattered on the cheap tile floor. The video was still playing on a loop on my laptop screen. I forced myself to move, dragging the progress bar back to the exact moment Leo had tilted his phone toward the light. The text thread on his screen was perfectly clear, glowing brightly against his face, and the sender's name at the top of the screen made my breath catch in my throat. Sharon Vance, my stepmother. The final message she had sent just 19 minutes before they lit the fire was sickeningly, unambiguously clear. The trust clause is ironclad. If she doesn't claim the funds before the signing date, every single dollar rolls straight back to your dad. Do it fast and make it clean. No mistakes this time. I stared at those words until they blurred into a meaningless jumble. This wasn't about scaring me out of town. This wasn't a warning. They genuinely believed that if I disappeared, if I was dead before I could sign those papers at the bank, the money would automatically default to my father. They were wrong, dead wrong. But they were fully prepared to murder me based on that catastrophic mistake. My chest felt like it was being crushed in a vice. I couldn't breathe. I fumbled for my own phone, my fingers clumsy and numb, and dialed the only number I knew I could trust. Chloe answered on the first ring. "Where are you?" she asked, her voice laced with worry. "Room 7. "North Star Inn," I choked out. "Get here now, and don't stop for anything." She was at my door in less than 15 minutes, still wearing the same diner apron from that morning. I let her in, locked the door behind her, and dragged the dresser back in front of it. Then, without a single word of explanation, I hit play. We watched the entire horrifying video in dead silence. When Leo's chilling laugh echoed through the tiny room, Chloe's hand flew to her mouth. When Sharon's text message filled the screen, she gripped the edge of the bed as if she was about to fall over. "That's your stepbrother," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "And that's my stepmom," I replied, giving him his orders. She stared at the frozen image on the screen, then looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of horror and fury. "They think killing you will hand the money to your dad on a silver platter. That's what the old stolen copy of the trust says," I managed to say. "They never saw the updated version my grandfather added." Chloe's eyes hardened, her fear replaced by a cold, sharp resolve. "We're going to the police," she said, her voice firm. "First thing tomorrow morning. This isn't up for discussion. I barely slept that night. Every creak of the old motel, every footstep in the hallway sounded like they were coming for me." Around dawn, I slipped out of the room and walked back to the corner. Ms. Eleanor was already there, a permanent fixture wrapped in her faded coat. I knelt beside her. "You saved my life." She just shook her head slowly. "Not yet, I haven't." But I recognized that look on that boy's face weeks ago. It was the same look my own son wore. She took my hand and squeezed it once, her grip surprisingly warm and steady. "You do what you have to do now, child. I'll still be right here." The moment I stepped back into the motel room, Chloe grabbed my arm. "We're leaving in 5 minutes. I already called in sick to the diner. This ends today." Chloe reversed out of the motel parking lot before the sun had even fully risen, driving straight to the Omaha Police Department's central headquarters. We walked through the heavy glass doors into a lobby that was still mostly empty. The sergeant at the front desk took one look at my pale, terrified face and buzzed us through a locked door without a single word. Detective Miller met us in a small, sterile interview room. It had gray walls and a metal table that was bolted to the floor. He was in his early 40s with salt and pepper hair and calm, intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything. I placed the small black USB drive on the table between us. "This is a video of my stepbrother pouring gasoline in the park where I've been staying," I said, my voice shaking slightly. My stepmom told him to do it. He inserted the drive into his department-issued laptop without a word and pressed play. The room was completely silent except for the tinny sound of Leo's voice coming from the speakers, bragging about deadlines and money. When Sharon's text message illuminated the screen, Detective Miller paused the video. He leaned in close, reading the words twice. Then he looked up at me. "Do you have the trust document?" I slid the folded, worn copy across the table. The same pages Sharon had waved in my face the night she threw me out. He scanned the clause she was so obsessed with, the one about the funds reverting to my father if I failed to claim them. Miller nodded once. "Sit tight," he said. They kept us there for most of the day. First, a forensics technician came in and confirmed that the video hadn't been tampered with and that the metadata was completely intact. Then, they ran Leo's face through their database. His driver's license photo popped up on the screen almost instantly. Less than 2 hours later, another detective brought in Leo's friend from the video. The kid immediately asked for a lawyer, but he still gave a written statement admitting that Leo had paid him $200 to help teach someone a lesson. By late afternoon, Detective Miller came back into the room. "We have enough for an arrest warrant. Attempted aggravated arson carries significant prison time in Nebraska. We're picking him up tonight." Chloe drove me to her small apartment so I wouldn't have to be alone. At 12:47 a.m., my phone lit up with Detective Miller's number. "Leo Vance is in custody," he said, his voice calm and steady. Uniformed officers went to the house on West Maple Road about 20 minutes ago. He tried to run out the back door, but we had the yard covered. He's not talking yet, but the evidence against him is airtight. I asked about Sharon. She showed up 10 minutes later screaming that it was all a huge misunderstanding. She already had a lawyer on speed dial, one of the best criminal defense firms in the state. The judge granted her bail, but with strict conditions: an ankle monitor, a no-contact order, and she had to surrender her passport. She's back at home now, but that bracelet will alert us if she gets within 500 feet of you. Chloe let me crash on her couch that night. The next morning, I saw it. A dark sedan was parked across the street from the Gas Go when I left for my shift. The same car shadowed Chloe's Honda for the next 2 nights. Sharon might have been wearing an ankle bracelet, but her belief that the money would eventually go to my father was unshakable. She wasn't finished, not by a long shot. On Friday morning, the trust officer from the downtown bank called while I was wiping down the lottery ticket counter. "Ms. Monroe, the final paperwork is ready for you. Just bring 2 forms of ID and come in any time today. Once you sign the acceptance documents, the entire $1.8 million will be transferred immediately into the segregated account we've established in your name. It's in your name only, no co-signers, no one can override it." I told my manager I had a family emergency and clocked out. Chloe picked me up and we drove to the bank in tense silence. The bank lobby was cool and hushed, the sound of my worn-out sneakers echoing on the polished marble floors. We were led to a private office with thick carpeting and a heavy mahogany desk. The officer walked me through every single page: tax forms, beneficiary designations, fraud protections, penalty clauses. Finally, she slid the last signature sheet across the desk. "This is it. After you sign on this line, no one can touch the principal of this trust without your explicit written consent. Ever." I signed Ava Monroe in steady black ink. For the first time in weeks, my hand didn't shake. When the document scanner beeped, confirming the signature, she smiled warmly. "Congratulations. You are now a very wealthy young woman." We walked out of the bank and into the blinding midday sun. My new debit card felt foreign and heavy in my pocket, like it belonged to someone else. The phone call started before we even reached the car. First, an unknown Omaha number. Then, Sharon's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring 5 times, then silenced it. A text message followed immediately. "We need to talk. As a family. I can explain everything. Please, just meet me." I blocked her number. An hour later, as Chloe was driving us to get some lunch, Detective Miller called. "Your stepmother just tripped her ankle monitor's perimeter alarm 3 separate times. She hired a private investigator licensed out of Lincoln. It's the same guy who's been sitting in the Gas Go parking lot and outside your friend's apartment building since yesterday. We have him on traffic cameras switching vehicles to avoid being detected. We have units bringing him in for questioning right now." I thanked him and hung up, my fingers feeling cold and numb despite the warmth of the car. That night, I worked the closing shift by myself. At 11:03 p.m., the last customer left, and I locked the front doors, counted the cash drawer, and switched off the neon open sign. The back parking lot was nearly empty, just a couple of semi-trucks idling under the bright floodlights. I had my keys out, heading for Chloe's car, when a black SUV came tearing into the lot and swerved to cut me off. The driver's side window rolled down. A man in a dark windbreaker leaned out, his face half hidden in shadow. He didn't say a word. He just extended a phone toward me. Sharon's voice, low and venomous, hissed from the speaker. "Drop every single charge, Ava. Sign the money over to your father, just like the trust intended, and this all goes away. But if you keep pushing this, next time there won't be a warning." I backed away slowly until my back hit the cold, rough surface of the cinder block wall. The man held the phone steady, waiting for my response. I pulled my own cell phone out of my apron pocket, hit the speed dial button Detective Miller had programmed for me, and put it on speaker so the man in the SUV could hear every word. "Detective, I'm in the east lot of the Gas Go on Dodge Street. There's a black SUV, Nebraska plate starting with Tango 49er. Your messenger is delivering a threat for Sharon Vance right now. Miller's voice came back instantly, calm and sharp. "Stay exactly where you are, Ava. Units are en route. 90 seconds out." The SUV's engine roared to life. Tires smoked as the driver threw it into reverse, clipped the side of a dumpster with a loud screech of metal, and sped off toward the highway on-ramp. I stood there under the buzzing fluorescent light, my pulse hammering in my ears, knowing that this fight had just escalated to a whole new, terrifying level. The siren split the night before the SUV even made it to the highway. 3 unmarked police sedans and 2 patrol cars boxed it in at the I-80 interchange. The driver tried to make a run for it, jumping out and attempting to vault the median, but an officer tackled him, slamming him face first onto the asphalt before he'd gone 10 feet. Inside the vehicle, they found the burner phone, still warm from Sharon's call. They also found a printed-out Google Maps page with the gas go circled in red ink and an envelope stuffed with $5,000 in cash, held together by a rubber band and a handwritten note. "Final warning. No mistakes." Chloe and I arrived at the station just after 2 a.m. to give our formal statements. By the time the sun came up, the hired thug had already signed a full confession. He admitted that Sharon had contacted him 2 days earlier, instructing him to put the fear of God into me and make sure I dropped all the charges. He even handed over the original text message thread from Sharon, where she spelled out exactly what he was supposed to say to me. The on-duty judge revoked her bail at 3:17 a.m. Uniformed officers rolled up to the house on West Maple Road before the streetlights had even turned off. There was no high-priced lawyer this time. Sharon was processed in a standard-issue orange jumpsuit and taken directly to the Douglas County Jail. The prosecutor added felony witness tampering and making a criminal threat to her existing charges. By noon, every joint bank account she shared with my father was frozen. A lien was placed on their property that same afternoon. 36 hours later, Robert Carter showed up at the North Star Inn. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His shirt was untucked and wrinkled, his eyes were bloodshot, and his hands were trembling as he stood in the doorway of the dingy lobby. The night clerk buzzed my room. For a moment, I almost told him to send my father away, but instead, I walked downstairs. The second he saw me, he collapsed to his knees, right there on the worn, stained carpet between the ice machine and the snack vending machine. "Ava, please," he choked out, his voice raw and broken. "Drop the charges. Sharon and Leo, they just got carried away. They're still your family. I never wanted anyone to get hurt. I just wanted us all to stay together, like we were before." I stared down at the pathetic, broken man who was my father. You stood there in complete silence the night she threw me out with nothing but the clothes on my back. You read the same outdated trust document she did. You let them believe that if I disappeared, all that money would just fall into your lap. "I thought we could fix it," he whispered, tears cutting clean tracks through the stubble on his cheeks. "I never, ever believed they'd actually—" "You never tried to stop them either," I finished for him. He reached for my hand, but I took a step back. "You all bet everything on one paragraph of a legal document you didn't understand. You were wrong from the very beginning. And now it's too late." The motel's security guard appeared behind him. The guard and the night clerk took his arms and gently lifted him to his feet. He didn't fight them. He just kept repeating my name over and over as they walked him out the door. I watched through the grimy glass as he sat in his old pickup truck for almost half an hour, his forehead pressed against the steering wheel, before he finally drove away. Several months later, I stood outside the main courtroom at the Douglas County Courthouse, my hands shoved deep into the pockets of a new coat, one that actually kept the Nebraska wind out. The gallery inside was nearly empty, just a couple of local reporters and Chloe, who sat right beside me. The judge read the verdicts in a calm, measured voice. Sharon Vance received a sentence of 7 years for felony witness tampering, criminal threat, and conspiracy to commit aggravated arson. Leo Brooks was sentenced to 5 years in a juvenile facility. Once he turned 21, he would be automatically transferred to an adult prison to serve the remainder of his term. The house on West Maple Road was sold at a sheriff's auction within weeks. My father lost everything, except for that old pickup truck he still drove to a series of dead-end jobs that barely paid the rent on a tiny one-bedroom apartment near the river. I used a portion of the trust to move Ms. Eleanor Gable into Prairie View Gardens, the best assisted living community in the state. She had a private room with huge windows, and I made sure she had fresh flowers delivered every single week. She had 3 restaurant-style meals a day. The first time she walked along the garden path wearing real, sturdy shoes instead of plastic bags wrapped around her feet, she cried so hard that a nurse rushed over, thinking something was terribly wrong. Chloe moved into the spare bedroom of the small house I bought on a quiet street downtown. She quit her job at the diner and enrolled full-time at the university, thanks to a scholarship I set up in her name. We spent weeks painting the walls in bright, cheerful colors that didn't remind either of us of cheap motels or jail cells. On the final day of the trial, the trust attorney from the bank took the stand to enter the official document into the court record. He read aloud the clause my grandfather had quietly added when I was 16, the one that Sharon and my father had never seen. Should Ava Monroe die or otherwise fail to accept the trust principal prior to the designated signing date, the entire corpus shall transfer irrevocably to the Harold Monroe Memorial Scholarship Fund for at-risk youth of Douglas County. No portion shall revert to Robert Monroe or any other family member under any circumstance. Sharon's face just collapsed. She stared at the document as if it had physically reached out and slapped her. The courtroom was utterly silent except for the soft thud of the judge's gavel confirming the exhibit. After the sentencing, the deputies led her past me in handcuffs and leg irons. She stopped, her eyes wild with a fury that had curdled into madness. That money was supposed to be ours, she hissed through the space between us. I looked her directly in the eye. You tried to have me killed for money that was never, ever going to be yours. You lost everything because of your own greed. That's the price you pay. I walked out into the bright Nebraska sunlight and didn't look back. Sometimes kindness comes from strangers when your own family fails you. Sometimes the people who share your blood are the ones who are willing to spill it. But the real family, the one that truly matters, is the one you choose for yourself, and the one that chooses you back. Ms. Eleanor taught me that with $5 and a life-saving warning. Chloe proved it to me every single day since. And I learned, the hard way, that no amount of money is worth selling your soul for. If you're watching this, and there's someone in your life who has shown you what a real family looks like, even if it wasn't the one you were born into, drop your city in the comments and tell me their name. Let's all remind each other that kindness always finds a way to come back to you, especially when everything else seems to be falling apart.